Hi, I'm Mark Zipic, Rocker Farm Auction. I'm here to discuss a highly important example of David Drake stoneware that we'll be selling in our spring 2022 auction. This jar was made by David Drake, the enslaved potter of Edgefield, South Carolina, and bears his signature on the shoulder next to the name Mr. Miles. So we have Mr. Miles Dave in incised script here at the shoulder. And you can see there's also 3 slash marks at the shoulder denoting 3 gallons. The inscription is very deep and clear. On the reverse, we have the incised date, August 16th, 1845. This jar is a beautiful glaze, very heavy glaze, high luster, and some very interesting modeling throughout. Very attractive in the variations in green you get throughout it. And there's some iron spotting on the reverse. The form is exceptional. There are only a few jars known by Dave that feature this open strap handle form. In this case, one handle has been lost. You see the elegant construction of this handle that rises high above the collar. The collar itself is also unusual. You can see it's very narrow for Dave's work. Dave's jar rims were usually wider. They usually also had a collar, a short collar that raised up above that semi-rounded rim. So in this case, the construction of the jar is also unusual and very special as well. It seems like he was trying to do something a little more ornamental with this piece. The date is highly unusual. August 16th, 1845 dates this jar to his ownership by Reverend John Landrum. Previously, he was owned by Lewis Miles. And during this window, 1843 to 1849, Dave did not sign any of his work. This is referred to as Dave's silent period, and it's brought about a lot of speculation, a lot of rigorous discussion about why this potter was suddenly not allowed to sign his work, something that he'd been known for at Lewis Miles Pottery. And the general consensus, the general feeling, this is partly based on evidence that Reverend Landrum's son, Benjamin Franklin Landrum, was a particularly wicked owner of slaves, is that the Landrums did not allow him to sign his work during this time. But then we have this piece that not only bears a signature from that time period, but also bears the inscription Mr. Miles. And so what does that mean? Was Dave being loaned out to Lewis Miles during this period? Was this piece made at Reverend Landrum's pottery, but for sale by Mr. Miles? It brings about all sorts of interesting questions. And in our research, we found something that could suggest what exactly happened here. 4 days before this jar was made, Reverend Landrum's daughter died in Alabama. So our theory on this jar is that during that time, while Reverend Landrum was in mourning, possibly even away in Alabama, Dave was rented out to Landrum's son-in-law, who was Lewis Miles. And it was a nearby property. They both were in Horse Creek Valley. And for this very brief period during August of 1845, Dave was allowed to work with Miles, and therefore was allowed to inscribe his work again. But again, this mysterious jar brings about all these interesting questions about what enslaved labor was truly like in Edgefield, how different enslaved potters were allowed to work at different sites, what the arrangements were, and also, as an adjunct to that, for potters, what were they allowed to do based on the nature, the disposition of their enslaver at the time? This damage to the rim was either incurred during the firing or was somehow lightly damaged during the firing, as we can see by an air pocket when the rim was rolled over. And so it was probably lost during or shortly after the firing. And this handle, the fragility of such handles, we see that as a frequent flaw in American stoneware. Double strap handle jar missing one of its straps. And maybe somebody was carrying it by one handle and banged the other, who knows. But it's an easy restoration if so desired. This is certainly one of the rarest Dave pieces known. The form is excellent, the glaze is excellent, and so we have an excellent, a very appealing combination of both rarity and physical beauty. And we are thrilled to offer this in our spring 2022 auction.